Welcome back to the Effort Over Everything podcast. I'm your host, Jason Khalipa. On today's episode, Gabe Yanez and I, we're back on the mic for our weekly episode where we dive into questions that you guys have asked and we talk about what's going on in our lives. Now, this week, we start off talking a little bit more on the business side. So if you're interested in the business side of fitness, definitely the first part of this conversation is excellent for you. We then navigate into easy meals to make. Gabe shares some nutrition advice. I really appreciate what he had to say. We finished off by talking about our compete track, talk a little bit about assault bike techniques. If you're interested in getting better at the assault bike, this one's gonna be great for you. And lastly, if you're a gym owner out there and you have not checked out the Build Better newsletter, make sure to check out the podcast show notes. We talk a little bit more about this in the episode, but we have a ton of content that comes out every other week that Gabe puts out that's a lot of value. So make sure to check out the Build Better newsletter. And if you're getting value out of these podcasts, if you enjoy them, just tell a friend about it. That's all I ask. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's keep getting after it. See you guys again next week. All right, I'm officially recording. So here's an interesting thought process, right? So when you look at like models like F45, Orange Theory, they're a franchise model versus CrossFit, which is a license model, which is completely different. I understand that, where, there's more systems and specific guidelines you have to follow and et cetera. And I'd say there are pros and cons of both, right? CrossFit, the barrier to entry was pretty low. So it allowed guys like me to open without taking on these huge loans, et cetera, or have a better opportunity to open and not have to have, $500,000 in the bank or whatever it was. But on the flip side, it lacked consistency across all locations, whereas F45, Orange Theory, et cetera, they had a big, kind of barrier to entry. So you're not able to get maybe some of these guys who could maybe build something special, but there was more consistency. And I'm curious if you go back in time. So when I was first introduced to CrossFit, it was in 2006. And the first gym I ever visited was CrossFit One World in Fremont. And this gym was inside of a training area. So they had jiu-jitsu, stand-up MMA, and then like this little CrossFit area. And then from there, that inspired the Austin McGeebing, who was my coach at the time, to open up a CrossFit inside of a racquetball court at a conventional gym that I worked at. So I went from training at this one gym to then in 2007, we opened up a small studio inside an 800 square foot racquetball court with we built our own pull-up bars. We built everything because Rogue wasn't as really around at that point in 07. And I wonder, looking back on that, where the inspiration came from One World. Then our inspiration came from One World. Then we went to CrossFit HQ, the original CrossFit in Santa Cruz, and you get inspiration there. But I wonder what would happen for the trajectory of CrossFit as they opened if the first initial one, like in Santa Cruz, looked different, had a different appeal. Would that have stemmed and sparked a bunch of gyms that looked similar to that? Because what ended up happening is you got a bunch of gyms that ended up looking like that original CrossFit warehouse, bay doors, a lot of equipment, et cetera. And that kind of stemmed it. I wonder if that first location was in a retail spot and looked different, would all the CrossFits from there in the future have set that expectation? It was just something I was just thinking about as you and I were talking before we started recording.
Yeah, I think naturally, it would have. Everyone's going to take inspiration from what came before them. But I think that, it was a different time back then. Like in many ways, Orange Theory and all of these other places are a response to what CrossFit and Glassman created. Like they saw an opportunity because there was an arbitrage between the offering and like the aesthetic. And they realized that hey, group class fitness, people like that. But does everyone like doing group class fitness on dirty floors where your shirt is gross after you do some burpees? Probably not. So there's an opportunity there to offer group class, make it exciting, get as many people in the room as possible while offering maybe, a more high-end experience, just from an aesthetic point of view. But maybe you can argue that wouldn't have happened had CrossFit not shown how popular the group class model was in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that what Greg did, changed the landscape. I was just curious, many people, I don't know. There was probably very few people remember what the original CrossFit was, and even less people ever went there. And it's still in some of these old school videos from 2005, 2006, and it was an interesting time because that set the standard for what was to come in the future. And really, for the most part, you know, the gyms have kind of stayed in that same realm. You know, I think we've kind of taken a little bit more of a retail approach, but for the most part, you know, the warehouses are still popular. And I still think for a lot of gyms, it makes sense, especially if your zoning's okay, because you can keep your rent cheap, you could be loud, you could drop weights. There's still a lot of benefits there. It just wasn't where we were going from a brand perspective. But I just found that to be interesting, how the original catalyst could then stem and spark all these additional things in CrossFit in particular, because they never told you how to run your business or what to do. They just let you license the mark.
I wonder if, you know, if you were to open a gym today, though, because I understand what you're saying about, you know, the warehouse model still has its advantages. You can drop weights, so on and so forth. But I wonder if opening a gym today, you know, you would think differently about those things even mattering, right? Like, do you have to be able to drop weights? Do you have to be, you know, in a really big warehouse, or can you get away with this much smaller footprint? Do you need, you know, a place where you can blast music, or is it beneficial to be somewhere with better foot traffic and, you know, being able to have some amenities and other kind of businesses close by that kind of like cross-pollinate each other? Because I think the landscape has also changed.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to do it all over now, when we first originally started, we started in this super small spot. I mean, it was, so you got to remember, the first gym I ever began at was in a racquetball court, and it felt pretty claustrophobic, but we made it work, right? And from there, I went to 1,500 square feet was our first gym in Santa Clara. And man, this place was off the beaten path, and it was just grimy, dude. I mean, it was really not great. Next door to us, actually, these two guys actually lived in the warehouse next door, which is obviously completely illegal, but they were living there. And so, man, they'd be smelling up food and all this kind of stuff. But anyways, the warehouse, though, got me started because the rent was so affordable, but, you know, the zoning wasn't complete. So if I was looking to do that again, although it's alluring because the rent is affordable, et cetera, has high ceilings, all these different benefits, you know, more than likely I was actually operating illegally there. So, but I think if I was able to find like a semi-retail, like a quasi-retail / warehouse spot, that's probably what I would go for nowadays, because I don't know how many people just walking off the street and come visit our gym, versus I also don't think they want to go to some like really out of the way crazy warehouse. So I think if you're able to find like this hybrid location where it's retail-ish but still warehouse space, I think that would be the best option for a gym owner looking for a space.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have, man. The space and the entire just kind of world we're operating now has changed so much. You know, another thing that I'm assuming is different, I've never owned a gym, but I'm assuming is very different, is also how strict, you know, like local officials are with you getting away with operating illegally. Like, I think that in the past, a lot of gyms operated under the radar because like people didn't know what to look for. Like, they didn't know that these gyms were a thing. They were just like, yeah, that's like a warehouse setting over there. They might not even know that people are working out now. Whereas now I feel like, you know, because it's become so mainstream, like, you know, whoever goes out and, you know, gives you a fine or whatever it is for violating these things is more on top of what to look for.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny, out of all the years, I know that a lot of gyms operate illegally, but you don't really hear stories about them getting shut down. So we have been shut down at one of our sites in Mountain View. We got shut down. We got like this, I remember we showed up one day and we had like this pink slip on the door. It was like, it was terrible. I can't remember exactly. I think that one was like an ADA compliance issue. That one wasn't a zoning issue, but it feels terrible because it just frightens the hell out of you. But for a gym owner out there who's not zoned properly, you know, and the reasoning for the zoning I get. Now, some cities are better or worse than others. Like if you're in a different state, you know, like there's places, you know, out in Texas and other areas where the zoning isn't as big of an issue compared to here in California. And what they're really trying to alleviate is that you don't have like a warehouse space, you know, doing like high machinery type stuff right next door to an assembly use of people running in and out of the gym. And so in theory, I understand the concept. I'm surprised more people haven't gotten in trouble for it. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a consideration to have where, like, as a new gym owner, what would you do? I think if I were to do it over again, I'd go for like a quasi retail / warehouse. So like a little bit more retail in the front, a little bit more warehouse in the back. So you get the, best of both worlds. I would try and have a standalone building, and I'd probably go for like 3,000 square feet. I'd probably go much smaller in hindsight, because I'd rather just grow out of that space and be bursting at the seams and maybe open a second location or expand out than have too much space and maybe that rent number is an issue. Hindsight's always 2020. We've had our first space was 1,500 square feet. We've gone as big as 42,000 square feet, and we've gone as small as the 1,500. So it just depends.
So interesting to go through that thought experiment, right? Of like, if I were to do this again, because hindsight's 2020, but I think it does give you like some good lessons to pull from that, hopefully can help you make, more educated decision in the future.
Yeah. Well, and there's always like one-offs too. Like, to be fair, the one location we had that was 46,000 square feet, the reason why it made sense at the time is because I knew the landlord, and, we signed this deal on a napkin at a diner, and we got it for $5,000 a month. And at that price, it was just a no-brainer for us. We ended up subleasing out, half the space or a quarter of the space, whatever, to different people. And I ended up being positive on our rent. And so that was an example where, like, if you have a competitive advantage, take that, right? Like, if your family owns a building and you could go in there and operate your business out of it and maybe get, a discounted rent number, well, that might give you the competitive advantage you need to be successful. So go for it. Those situations do come up every now and then, but in general, I would recommend to start a little bit smaller than people think, because I'd rather have the pleasant problem of outgrowing it than having to, have too much space, and including the fact that like TIs aren't that crazy. Like, you're talking $100,000 in build out. You can do that somewhere else.
What's a TI?
Tenant improvement. So, something to consider when you take, for example, like I don't know, let's just use like a Chick-fil-A, well, maybe not Chick-fil-A, but like use like take, for example, something that requires a lot of build out, like an Apple store or something like that, right? Where they're redoing the facade, they're changing it to glass, they're doing all these things. They're spending millions of dollars on tenant improvements. They're taking a space. Oh, here's a good example, a restaurant. Let's just say you took a current like Walgreens and you converted it into a restaurant. The tenant improvements on that, you're talking millions of dollars to get in a hood, get in all these different things, build it all out. And so if you build out a restaurant, you want to make sure that you sign a long enough lease that it pencils out. Or maybe the landlord gives you TIs. But, again, using this as an example, you take over a small space, let's just say it's 5,000 square feet, and you open up a restaurant in there, and you spend $3 million to build out the restaurant space. For you to recoup that $3 million is probably going to take you a while. So what you need to think about is, what is my profit going to be? Let's just say it's $100,000 a month. Well, even if your profit is $100,000 a month, you'd still need to be there for years before you recoup those initial tenant improvements. So it wouldn't make sense for you to sign a short-term lease, is the theory. The opposite almost applies in fitness in a sense. There's exceptions to this. We've spent a lot of money in the past on build-outs, but in general, if you're a brick and mortar, if you own a jiu-jitsu school, jiu-jitsu even more so, or a CrossFit gym, your tenant improvements are probably gonna be minimal. Throw some paint on the walls, throw down some rubber, put some matting down, get some equipment. All that is movable. The equipment's all movable. And maybe you build out a shower, and maybe you do some ADA compliance stuff, but you're talking 50, 100,000. And so you could sign a shorter term lease and get away with it potentially to see if you could outgrow that space. Sorry, I could go off on tangents on this stuff. I'm very passionate about it.
I see that. Anything else you wanted to cover on the business side? You're on a big business kick this morning.
No, I'm on a business kick this morning. No, gym owners, make sure that if you did not check out our Coach to CEO webinar series that Gabe and I have been doing, we're currently going to be hitting week 3 when this releases. It was a 3-week Coach to CEO series, and we'll go ahead and link that in the podcast show notes for anybody who wants to talk more business. But should we pivot to more athlete specific or what?
Yeah, I mean, we should stick to the plan, something that the big guy struggles with from time to time, but we eventually get him back on. We put the question stickers on this week, some good nutrition and training questions that came in. Jay, I don't know if there's a couple that you wanted to answer. I can go first.
Yeah, go for it. I have a good one too, but hit it.
I really like this. Well, not I really like. It's definitely something that I'm passionate about. But easy meals to make. I think this is such a good topic because, you know, when it comes to fitness as well, but nutrition especially, you know, a big excuse or valid reason, depending, that people come up with is not having enough time, right? Like, I would love to cook my own meals. I would love to have super healthy food, but I just don't have the time. And again, like, I completely sympathize, you know, and I don't exactly know what it's like to be a parent yet. We're going to find out here pretty soon, but I sympathize with like a lot of, you know, working parents out there that have to get the kids ready in the morning, and then they have to go to work, and then they have to pick up the kids, and then they probably have like an after school activity. And, you know, like, where do you fit the time to like cook a really like good home cooked meal on a daily basis? And yes, you can food prep. Yes, this. So I know that this question of like easy meals comes up a lot. And, you know, there's really no like easy solution, but here are a couple things that I think are super useful that have worked for me and my wife Ariel that I think I can share, and hopefully you know, people get some benefit out of this. I think that food, like meal prep, is tough if you're trying to like, hey, I need to have my exact 7 meals for the whole week. And I think that sometimes people approach food prep with like this all or nothing. Like, it's, I need to have everything in Tupperware. Like, you see those, you know, some of those influencers, how they like take a picture of on the Sunday of their fridge and it looks like crazy, like everything's organized. Like, that's great. Unrealistic for some, probably. But there's an in between where if you identify, hey, what takes the longest to cook? Like, for us, that's usually our protein. So what we'll do is, you know, we love the air fryer, we love the slow cooker. And what we've been doing a lot lately, that's a great way to get a lot of protein cooked at once, is to put in like a big beef roast. So like an arm roast or a pike roast.
Yeah, you just leave it all day, right?
Leave it all day in the slow cooker. It makes like a delicious, like shredded beef. And it's enough for both of us for 2 days of dinner and probably like a third day of lunch. And so, because protein takes the longest, like finding ways to cook your protein that are not super hands-on. So you're not like sitting there in front of the stove, like looking at it, making sure it's perfect. Like, set the slow cooker and forget it. Grilling is also just a great way to like get a lot done at once. Like, most grills that people will have will be able to do a lot. So you can do like a lot of chicken breast, a lot of that. But my biggest recommendation is, if you're going to food prep anything, food prep your protein, because that tends to take the longest. For your carb, you can usually quickly make some like microwavable bag of rice, throw some potatoes in the slow cooker. Like, it's much easier to get your carbs day in and day out. Because I know another thing that people struggle with like food prepping a lot in advance is just boredom. Like, you know, how many days in a row do I want to have, you know, chicken and white rice? I get that. So the nice thing about like, you know, prepping a bunch of shredded beef on Monday is, you know, we'll have beef and rice on Monday. We'll have beef tacos on Tuesday, and then we'll have like the rest of it with some like potatoes on Wednesday. And the meal feels different enough that like you don't get boredom, but I'm also not cooking the protein every single day. So that would be like my best piece of advice of like, quote unquote, an easy meal, is prepping your protein. And then the second tip that I have for people is, especially with like the popularity now of organ meats, there is almost any of like the online like places where you can get beef. They usually now do a ground beef blend that has a little bit of liver, a little bit of heart, and the rest is just ground beef. And honestly,
Is it cheaper?
No, it's not cheaper. It's usually actually just a little bit more. But you know, the argument is that like organ meats are very, very nutritious, which they are. If you follow like, you know, the crazy like Liver King type people, you know, they're eating liver raw. I think it's completely unnecessary. I've even tried that route. It's you don't need anywhere near that much. You definitely don't need to eat it raw to get like a lot of the benefits from organ meats, which is super, super nutrient dense. So always having it on hand. Another thing we always have on hand is ground beef blend we order from a place called White Oak Pastures or Rep Provisions. Both of those are great. And so it's a blend. You can't really taste it. And it's just a really easy thing to like make tacos with, make ground beef, make chili, that you're getting a little bit of that stuff in. But honestly, like we've even done like blind taste testing, and that like we have pretty picky eaters in our family, like our siblings. And if we don't tell them that's what we used for like meatballs or whatever when we have family dinner, like they don't bat an eye. Whereas if you told them that it was that, like
Yeah.
they wouldn't touch it. So those are my 2 tips. It's prep your protein ahead of time. I think carbs are relatively easy to do day in and day out. Slow cooker, great idea. Grill, great idea. And then having like a ground beef blend that has a little bit of organ meat is just a great way to like easily get some of the most like nutrient dense food you can have access to.
Yeah, I mean, Ashley likes using the pressure cooker. I don't know how often you guys use that, but she uses a pressure cooker for a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah.
But like your slow cooker, to your point, like, you know, she'll throw something there at like before kids go to school, and by the time like the kids get back or whatever happens, like everything's all, that protein's ready. So like Ashley has a tendency to do the same thing as what you're talking about. I don't cook that often. I do grill. I grill a lot. That's something that I really enjoy doing, right? So, and it's not that like slow. So like, for example, Ash will prepare like patties, like what you're saying, or whatever the meat is. Just go out there, especially if I have a gas grill. Like I have a green egg too, but that's more like a weekend thing. But gas grill, boom, 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 all good to go, you know? Easy.
Easy and quick, easy and quick. What training question do you want to tackle?
Dude, so I'll start with this one. It's a great question. Great question. World-class question. What separates NC Compete programs to the various others out there, Mayhem, Proven, etc.? So I think what's important is that NCFIT offers a variety of different programs that we use in our gyms. We use them in our gyms. And I think that's an important note, because something that we've recognized over the years is that at times you'll have athletes that are on their own compete track that are kind of like creating their own environment in the corner. And what happens is like this cool kids club starts to develop at your gym, and it becomes kind of an issue long-term for the gym owner. Gym owners listening, I think, would probably relate to this. Now, if you're an athlete out there and you're like on the cusp of going to the games, like you need individual design, you are like right there. You've passed what, semifinals, quarterfinals, whatever, and you're like right there. You're probably going to need something like a, you know, HWPO Proven, or even more individual design than that. If you are intending to go to the CrossFit Games, I think those are great options for you. But if you're someone who's looking to come in, take class at your location, at your gym, or in our case, you know, do our workouts wherever you do them at, and are looking for additional volume to supplement, to add in additional, you know, fitness, that's where I think NC Compete plays a really good role. Meaning NC Compete revolves around our Metcon track. So the Metcon track, which everybody in the gym does, is the foundation. And then Compete kind of has additional layers. So from a gym owner perspective, and for us at our gym, it's beautiful because people come in before class or stay after class, but they're still taking class. They're still a part of our community. They're still, you know, joined as a culture, versus like on this like thing that no one can relate to. And I think that's the biggest difference between us and others, is that we revolve around our Metcon track to create the Compete track. We're not just completely creating something different, because we were basically the initial thoughts were we were tired of people creating their own cohorts in our gyms, and we wanted to encourage them to take class. Not to mention, I'm also a big believer that, you know, the program kind of matters, but not really. It's the environment you're in, and it's the push that you're giving. You know, I'm sitting here like 2 days out from, so I train pretty hard. I train pretty hard on the mats. I train pretty hard in the gym. But on Tuesdays, we film content at the gym. We get all of our coaches together. Not all of them. We had like 10 of them there the other day. And we were doing a workout, and I pushed hard because I wanted to beat these people, right? And I'm sorer than I've been in a while. It wasn't because the program was super creative or innovative. It was because I was putting myself in a competition mindset and competition environment. And so I think for people who are deciding between using our Compete track or others, don't jump around from program to program. You can if you want, but all programs are going to have their pros and cons. But at the end of the day, really focus on the environment you put yourself in, because that's ultimately how I believe you're going to go to the next level if you want to compete in the sport of fitness.
So I'm going to say, don't jump around from fitness program to program without the exception of like, you can if you want. You're just not going to get results that way. And I've been there, and I know a lot of people tend to gravitate towards like, oh, well, it's just the programming. Like, I'm not getting better because of the programming. And one thing that I definitely realized in when I was really pursuing performance is that, it's really easy to start progressing at a rate that is like this and expect that that's going to happen in perpetuity, because why not, right? Like, I'm working just as hard, I'm being just as consistent. But the truth of the matter is, like, we get to the point where we're getting close enough to our ceiling that it takes a lot more work, a lot more patience, a lot more consistency to make the same amount of progress that before you made just by showing up. And that is when it's most important to stay consistent with a plan. Whether it's NC Compete or any of the other brands out there, like, there's a method to the buildup that they have in their programming. Like, we have very smart coaches writing our programming. They have very smart coaches at writing their programming. If you do a month here, a month there, a month there, trying to hope that something is going to like unlock the secret to you making big fitness gains, you're not getting the intended benefit of what any of those three teams of really smart expert coaches have put together. And you're essentially throwing away the probably valuable money that you're investing in having access to all these programs.
Yeah, because you're not seeing, like, it's like you're going on a road trip, you're only going halfway there.
Not letting it work. Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I just really want to make sure I bring this note home. And when we have people at the gym who want to compete in the sport of fitness, like, that's great. Hell yeah. But I cannot tell you how important it is to create an environment where you're having fun and you're pushing each other. Like, there is a reason why these training camps are in camps, not individual. So, you got to find a way to make it sustainable and to push each other. And, you want to be able to find, ultimately, I think having a coach, I think, matters, but I think having training partners is the biggest thing, because on the days you're not feeling it, on the days you're beat up, they're the ones that pick you up. And on the days that they're not feeling it, they're not whatever, you could go pick them up. And I think that's what the energy is all about. For years and years and years, I saw that with NorCal CrossFit with Miranda, Pat, Alex, Molly, Garrett, Neil. We would go in general, I'm always pretty fired up, ready to rock. But there's some days that I'm not, right? And so when Miranda would come over to my garage at 5 a.m. and I didn't want to go do intervals, it made me feel like an asshole if I didn't go do them. So I did it. And it's that type of relationship and accountability that I think makes a big difference. So I just want to make sure I highlighted that too.
Another just example that I'll bring up that I think applies to most people out there, maybe not the person that is like guaranteed quarterfinal, competitor, definitely going to a semifinal. But for most people that, have performance aspirations, but are in this place where, 9 times out of 10, you're the fittest person in group class, but you're not like blowing everyone out of the water every single class. I think that there's such a benefit to how we structure NC Compete, where the expectation is that everyone's doing the main workout with class, because, and we all know this, there's always someone in that class that might have no competitive aspirations, but there's like that one member that
they're like a ninja at something, right?
Right. Or just has that like dad strength that, like, if it's the right workout, like, he'll give you a run for your money. Like, sure, he probably can't do a single muscle up, but if the workout is Cali Bear today, he's going to like fire you up because you're like, holy crap, like, I'm a competitor and I'm over here trying to keep up with 38-year-old dad because he's just strong. He used to be a D1 football player, whatever. There's always someone in class that in some way, shape, or form, I think can push, you in the right workout. Like, to Jason's point, like, you don't even need to have this room of killers like you did at NorCal CrossFit to get that push. There's plenty of people in the group class environment that I think can give you a push that's much more valuable than, hey, I'm doing this very specific program that is, I really believe in the corner alone 3 times a day.
Yeah, and I think that when you train alone, it's tough, right? I think there's benefit to training alone. I train alone a lot in my garage, more so for my own mindset and mental toughness and trying to break through things. But in terms of like training with other people, I think you get so much more out of it. And you could always adjust things. So let's just say you're an athlete out there and you're following a program. If you have other people doing it with you, I've had plenty of times where I'll let someone start before me. I will adjust their reps and I'll see if I can still beat them. There's all different types of ways you could gamify it to level the playing field if that's something you also want to do. Like, let's just say you have training partners and you always outperform them. Well, think about ways to try and level the playing field more so that they can really give you that push. Maybe you adjust the weights a little bit differently. Maybe you adjust the movements or the rep scheme. But those are other like little gamification ideas where it pushes you to see what's possible. The other day, I had Heber and Marston here, and we gamified that where the workout was 8 rounds. They did it as partners. So 1 round on, 1 round off. I did it as 8 rounds, like straight through. And the goal was to see, can I still beat them with 1 round on, 1 round off? So I did not beat them. It was kind of close, I guess, but they were hauling ass because they had a whole round to rest and I didn't have that. But that's an example.
It's a good example. I'm excited for that video to come out and watch you kind of go through that. Another question that I can answer quickly that came in is advice on best protein powders, complete profile of essential amino acids, etc. You know, whenever anyone like says, hey, nutrition questions, the supplement question always comes up. And I think we've talked about this in the past, Jay, like supplements shouldn't be the first thing you're thinking about. I think there's a lot of other things that need to be in place. I don't think Jason even takes supplements, and look at the size of this guy. Like, you don't need it. With that said, if you are asking for what I look for in a protein powder, just minimal ingredients. And when it comes to amino acids, the one thing that seems to be like unanimously understood as important is having at least 2 grams of leucine. Leucine is the amino acid that like sparks the protein synthesis process. So you just want to make sure that you have 2 grams of leucine in your serving of protein. There'll be some proteins out there that don't list how much of every amino acid they have. That's usually a red flag. It's a little bit more expensive to have that amount of leucine in it, but it's important. And that's the one thing that like unanimously seems to be the most important factor to like having a good, complete protein source. So look out for that. I like minimal ingredients. That's just kind of more of a personal thing. But the leucine content is probably the most important thing you want to look for.
Dude, love it. I mean, there's a lot of questions here. Favorite cardio machine? Favorite cardio machine? Favorite or most effective? Oh man. I mean, I'd say I don't know. That's a tough question, right?
It is a tough question. Because I was about to say the rower, and then I was like, oh, but the assault bike is so great.
Dude, and the runner's great too. I mean,
I haven't been able to use the runner as much. And I'm also just, from my endurance background, like I enjoy running outside so much that I wouldn't, I know it's great, but I wouldn't gravitate towards that. But between the rower and the assault bike, it's tough.
I'd probably go with the assault bike if I had to pick one. But I love the C2. I love them all, but I'd probably pick the bike. I think that it gives you the most aerobic conditioning while also supporting some type of like muscle stamina. I think it works both really well. So I'd go for that. One more is thoughts on no days off.
I'm just going to like humble brag here really quick. This was like way back in the day. I couldn't touch this now, but there was a while where I got super, super into the rower. Like I was rowing 3-4 times a week, like following a program on it. Like I just wanted to get good on the rower because I wasn't good at the rower, and I'm like a shorter guy. So it doesn't like, it's not a movement that like naturally is advantageous to me. And I remember I still have the screenshot. I rode a 6:46 2K. And that's like one of my biggest accomplishments in like all things functional fitness and CrossFit. Because a 6:46 isn't bad. It's pretty good.
It's cute. It's cute. It's good. It's not
well,
bad.
All right. I mean, what did you row for? Well, it was a 1K, right? It was a 1K to start the half marathon?
No, it was a 2K. I'm actually going to look it up right now.
Oh, yeah. I want to know. How low in the 6s did you get?
CrossFit Games 2K row. Let's see. I'm using the good old Google. So yeah, I think it was like 6:16, but let me I will tell you right now. Here we go. 2013. Hang on, wait for.
Because the 6:15 is like a 1:34 pace.
Wait, I think it was. Okay, row 1. Oh, okay. All right, fine. 6:21.
Oh, dude, come on. I was like right there.
Okay. But to be fair, right?
I'm
To be
kidding.
fair, I went from 6:21 and then you continued for a half marathon.
I know.
But
Did you hold back at all?
a little bit, but not that much. It's funny. The way the monitor worked, and it's like a random fact. So it was
you
a
said
half.
you didn't know, right?
I didn't know because it was a half marathon row, which is like X amount of meters, and it counted
Count
backward.
down. Yeah. I remember.
And so when you're looking at it, I just remember like, you're kind of like in the moment, you're trying to like do some basic math and you're like, what's X minus 2,000? You're like, because it wasn't like a simple like 26,000. It was like 26,523 or whatever it was.
Super random. Yeah.
Super random. And so I just remember I rode pretty damn hard for 7 minutes. And then I told myself, I said, I know for a fact I got a 2K in that time. So then I slowed down. But, my best achievement on the rower, I think, I told you the story about the 500 meter and eating bacon. So I think my favorite one was I was in the garage one time and I hit a sub 3 minute 1K. That was a pretty good accomplishment the first time I did that. I had like a 2:58. And I just remember this was like years ago. I just laid on the floor and I was so happy.
That hurts, man. That time domain hurts.
Dude, it's the worst, man. And then, obviously I've done a few 500s. My best 500 was 118. But I hit the first time I hit under 120, this guy walks into the gym. I just got done coaching. I happened to be eating bacon at the time. And he walks in, he's like, hey, you're Jason Khalipa. I was like, yeah, what's up, man? Welcome to the gym. Hope you're doing well. He's like, I want to challenge you to a 500 meter row. I was like, okay, when? He goes, right now. I'm like, oh shit. I was like, this guy. And at the time, like, it got me all fired up because like this guy's coming to my home. I'm trying to eat my bacon and he wants to throw down a 500 meter. And so I ended up peeing. Now, in his defense, he also got a pretty good time. I think it was like 121, but I PR'd my 500 meter row that day.
Oh, I can only imagine how that felt afterwards on your stomach. But yeah, man, I enjoyed that time when I was like really, really rowing a lot. Because it reminded me of swimming a little bit in that, because I feel like with the assault bike, and maybe this isn't necessarily true, but I feel like you kind of have to muscle it a little bit more. I feel like on the rower, you can find like a smooth, even when you're pulling hard and really trying to like put out a good effort, there's like a smoothness to it that's like, like methodical and kind of like, it reminded me of like swimming in many ways. Whereas the bike, I feel like regardless of the time domain, you're kind of gritting your teeth and like pushing through it.
I was doing a workout a couple of days ago with one of our coaches. Her name's Margot. And the workout was in 1 minute, accomplish 20 cal bike or 15 cal bike. The next minute was an AMRAP of either chest to bar pull-ups and squats or bar muscle ups and squats. And then you had a rest. So you came in off the bike. You were coming onto the bike fresh. You had a minute of rest. And I was trying to teach her this technique. And I think it's valuable where for me, I'm able to get 20 calories a minute, like especially if you're kind of like doing it in between other stuff pretty easily. I get it done in about 30 seconds by like right at the top of the minute beginning. I'll crank it pretty hard. I'll ramp up the RPMs pretty aggressively. I'll go for about maybe 15 seconds or until I feel like maybe my heart rate's spiking too much. And then I'll really lay off. Like I'll go from, let's just say 80, 90 RPMs to let's just say like 40 or 50 RPMs. And then I ramp it up one more time to 90 for like maybe 10 seconds and boom, you're at 20 or 15, depending on who you are. And it was a technique I was sharing with her. So I wanted to share it here, which is, ramp up for 15, drop for like 10, ramp up for 10, and you have your calories. And the reason why I think it helps is because, especially on like an echo bike or a assault bike, you exponentially gain calories when you're at a higher RPM. Like riding the assault bike at 65 RPMs is not easy. It still sucks, but you don't gain the type of calories you do if you're at like 90 RPMs. So a recommendation I like trying, at least try it, is sprint, regain your heart rate, sprint, regain your heart rate, and then jump off.
The thinking there is also, and I don't remember, I took my level 3 a while ago, so I might be getting the energy systems wrong. But the reasoning there too is that you're in the glycolytic system at first, and then you switch over to the aerobic system. So there's always a gain to be had by starting off with a sprint, not like a dead sprint, obviously, but if you start that assault bike like nice and slow, you're not necessarily going to be that much fresher than if you start really like full pedal on the gas, because at around that like 30-40 second mark, you switch energy systems. So you're done being over here completely anaerobic and you go into aerobic. So you might as well use that gas tank as much as you can, because you're going to switch over anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to talk to Chris about this, because the only caveat with this is that you will feel the blood rush to your legs a little bit. So you got to work the stamina there. Especially for me, I was combining it with air squats, but it's just something to think about, where you ramp it up. You're trying to keep your heart rate low. Once you feel like, oh shit, I cannot sustain this, then just drop it way down, not like kind of down, like way down. So you can really regain your breath, deep nasal breathing. And then you hit it one more time. Your intuition is going to say to keep the bike going kind of fast, because you're, whatever, but it's just a different technique to incorporate. And I think it's super valuable. It's kind of like gamifying the bike. Whereas like, take for example, box jumps. This is another good example. So if you jump up and jump down on a box jump versus jump up and step down, in particular on like a 30-inch box, you're not really saving that much time jumping down and jumping up than you would be jumping up, stepping down. And you got to kind of evaluate the energy expenditure to the time savings. So if you're on a bike and you're just like sprinting the whole time, or if you're going slow the whole time, or if you're doing this interval style concept, you should evaluate, how long does it take me to get 20 calories doing this interval style? How long does it take me going slow? How long does it take me going whatever? And then see which one works best for you. I remember one year before regionals, there was this event that was deadlifts and box jumps at 30 inches. And I must have done the workout 10 times. And I tried different techniques. Like, should I jump up, jump down for the first 5, then jump up, step down, and find what works for you, right? Because there's a threshold somewhere in there.
Does Austin Malleolo still have like the world record for that workout? I remember watching the video of him, dude. Austin Malleolo has the longest arms I have ever seen. And you can, it's crazy seeing it in that workout, because to deadlift, he doesn't have to move.
Dude.
Obviously he has to move, but he like doesn't have to move.
Dude, yeah. So he set the record for that. I don't think that in that particular one, actually Garrett beat me in that one too. It was 315 deadlift and then 30-inch box jump. That was a smoker, man. Dude, I remember the last like 9 reps of that. You would literally have to jump as hard as you humanly could, like literally as hard as I could, just to get onto a 30-inch box. Yeah, man, one year at regionals, this is funny. This is like 2000. I don't know, man, probably like 2012 or 13, probably 2012. We were at the Santa Clara Fairgrounds, and I had won the regionals like 3 years in a row at this point. And so a lot of people were kind of like paying attention to what I was doing. I was also in the lead at the time. And it was that, but it was raining. And so there was huge divots and we were on grass. And it's like you were deadlifting from a deficit. And anyways, long and short of it is, man, I false started like crazy. I mean, I went way early, and I got to go look up the video because now I don't remember what I was going to say about that story. But we were in like major divots, so never mind. That's my ADD kicking in.
It's crazy how much the sport has kind of
professionalized,
changed as well. Doing heavy deadlifts on divots and grass.
You're trying to move the bar because you're like in this deficit versus trying to like, you know what I mean?
Here's something I thought super interesting that I read about this morning. I'm curious if you've heard about it. Have you heard about liquid death?
Yeah. The water?
Yeah.
What about them?
So they hit a $700 million valuation today after being founded just 3 years ago, which is pretty crazy. Dude. And it's crazy because like if you boil down what the business is, it's canned water with like like heavy rock branding. It's crazy. It's insane. And it's gone insane. And I have a funny story about it too, where I saw them first. But I find these stories super fascinating because, and we have this conversation all the time, like the power of building a brand. Like if you hit the nail on the head with branding, you can sell water in a can. And that's it. It's water in a can. Like me and you today can start Jason and Gabe water in a can, and it would be the same product, like no different.
Yeah.
But I bet you we're not going to get to a $700 million
Dude,
valuation
it's
in 3
crazy.
years. It's insane.
Well, it's a New Zealand or Australian water company that they had a sparkling water and they had a regular water. I remember the first time I saw it, they had a black can and a white can. I was like, dude, this is stupid. I was in LA and a giant truck drove by me and it was like Liquid Death. And I was like, dude, why would anybody ever want to drink Liquid Death? Like, I don't understand the theory. And well, sure enough, here we are years later, and they have a $700 million evaluation.
It's insane. And the funny story is when I was at BCon, that summit that I went to that Gary Vee put on, they had like a welcome party the first day. It was like they had a live DJ and they had a whole bunch of vendors and people giving out free stuff. And I like needed water. Like I was like, I should drink some water. I should stay hydrated. You know, being the health nut that I am, I wasn't necessarily going to start the weekend off, especially because it was like early in the day, like drinking an energy drink or like a beer or anything like that. And I saw the Liquid Death booth and they were giving out Liquid Death for free because they just wanted to get into people's hands. And I like didn't think twice. Like I saw everyone holding the can, but I looked at the can and I was like, all right, definitely don't want to start my weekend off with one of those. And
Dude, exactly, right?
And I went to like the vendor, and because this was in like a, you know, like a sports park setting, I think I ended up paying like $7 for like a bottle of Dasani. And later I found out that like it was just water. Like they were giving out water. And I ended up going to like buy overpriced, crappy water. So that's my funny story about it. But yeah, man, it's interesting. They've like hit a nerve, and it's crazy what ends up going viral. Because I agree. Like if you would have told me that, you know, this crazy looking can that just sells water would become as popular as it has, I'd call you crazy.
Yeah, I mean, their branding is good for what it is, but it just seems, yeah. Anyways, well, hey, good for them. Hopefully, you know, we could have many people that listen to this show hit a $700 million evaluation. That'd be great.
Well, look out for Jason and Gabe Waterco launching next week.
Shout out to Gabe and Jason Waterco. Maybe it's the new coffee company we start. But I will say, gym owners, coaches, make sure you check out the Coach to CEO webinar series we did. I think it had a lot of value. If you're, a gym owner, go ahead.
So just a note on that. If you're listening to this, we've already done all 3 webinars live, but we do obviously have the recording. So the way to get the recording is sign up for our Build Better newsletter, because you can't sign up for the webinar series anymore. So the Build Better newsletter sign up is going to be in the show notes. Make sure you sign up. And in the next newsletter, I will include all 3 recordings so that you get the whole series. So just a note on that.
Build Better. Yep. Okay, perfect. And as per usual, you know, athletes, coaches, we have the NCFIT app. We also have the NCFIT Collective. It's exactly what we use in our gyms. I think we're putting out the best session plans and programming. So if you're tired of programming for your gym, we got you covered. I really think we have the best team in the business doing it, specifically because we own and operate our own gyms. It can't suck. And so if you're looking to outsource that, we got you covered. Just really appreciate you guys listening to these conversations. You know, we just riff on different subjects. We have plenty more questions that came in through Instagram we got to get to in later weeks. But make sure you guys are checking out, you know, at Jason Khalipa, at NC.fit. Check out Gabe Yanez. And, you know, we'll be putting up those sticker tabs. So make sure you guys add in your questions and we'll make sure we get to them over time. Gabe, any final words here, bro?
No, man. I mean, an unfortunate update, because I know we've been talking about the Mets and their their kind of exploits here. So it's funny because this always comes out a week later. So when this comes out, we should know if they made it past the first round of the playoffs or not. But they ended up losing the division in epic Mets fashion. They like collapsed in the last week of the season. They had been leading the division for 159 games out of the 162 game season. And then at the end, they lost and came in second.
Dude, I actually saw, so I was watching SportsCenter for a second because Caden's really into baseball. And they brought up the Mets as like one of the longest leading streaks ever, like top 3 ever for like winning the division for that long. Is that, you know what I mean? Like, I just was thinking of you.
It's rough, man. It's rough. It builds a lot of mental fortitude, though, being a Mets fan. But we're still in the playoffs, so there's still hope.
Are Giants going to the playoffs?
No, not this year.
Oh, shit. All right. Well, you heard it here first. Mets are in the playoffs, so root for them. And really appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back on again next week.